Hey everyone, welcome back to the Board Game Spotlight. Today we're going to look at Raccoon Tycoon from Glenn Drover and Forbidden Games. This is a game for 2 to 5 players and it plays in about 90 minutes. Now in Raccoon Tycoon, players are going to try to produce the most valuable commodities in an ever-changing and fluctuating marketplace. They're going to use those commodities to build towns or sell them for the best price to make the most profit, and you can use that profit to buy buildings or railroads. The player who owns the best railroads and towns at the end of the game is going to come out as the top dog in the land of Astoria. So let's take this to the table and I'm going to tell you how it plays. So we have the game set up and you'll notice there is a marketplace at the top of the board. We have railroads, towns, and your buildings. Now, each player is going to start the game with 3 of these price and production cards. There are 5 actions that a player can take on their turn throughout the game. The first being that you can take one of your cards and you can play it to produce 3 of the goods at the bottom and raise the price of the goods on top. So if we were to play this card, we would raise coal by 2 levels and then we would gain our choice of these 4. We would choose 3 of these. We would take a coal, and let's take a wheat and a wood. So we're going to gain those resources. Now, the resources you gain are going to be dependent on a few different factors. You're going to want to look at where the commodities sit on their track and how much you can sell those for profit. You're also going to want to look at the town buildings because the towns are going to require a specific resource type, or you can always give an X number of any of them to develop a town in the land of Astoria. So the second action you can do outside of playing a price and production card, and at the end if you play one you'll draw back up to your hand size of 3, you can sell your goods. So at this point we have a coal, a wheat, and a wood. We could go ahead and sell that coal for $4 and then it would drop that price down. So if we had multiple of a certain commodity, we could sell all of those in one action. So if we had 4, 5, even 6 coal and we sold it wherever it's located, we would then multiply the current price by the number of commodities that we are selling. So that is a way that you can flip your commodities for a very large profit. You really need to keep an eye on which commodities are moving and fluctuating based on what the players at the table are doing, because you can get severely undercut if a player goes before you and then they sell goods that maybe you are trying to sell. And so you really need to keep an eye on what your opponents are both producing and what you think they're going to try to sell. So the next thing you can do is you can actually auction off the railroads. Now these railroads, there is a set collection aspect to this game. And so depending on the number of railroads for the Sly Fox that you own at the end of the game, you will score victory points equal to that level. So the first is 2 points. And if you were to get all 4, you would then score 17 points for controlling or owning the majority of that railroad. So when you put a railroad up for auction, it's going to go for the listed value, and then everybody at the table is going to have a chance to join in. Now, a player could choose to pass. If they pass, they are no longer able to bid on that railroad for the remainder of that turn. The player that wins it could be the player that didn't put it up for auction. You can win the auction for a railroad outside of your turn. Now, if that happens, the player that puts the card up for auction is going to be able to still take an action. So they could even put another railroad up for auction if they wanted to, or they could take any of the other 4 actions available to them. Another action you can do is to develop and purchase a town. So we could purchase Bridgewater. We are developing this land in Astoria. We would have to discard 2 wheat, or we could discard 4 of any resource. And so to do that, this is going to give us a certain number of victory points. So there's actually a 1-to-1 ratio at the end of the game for towns and railroads. If you pair this town with a railroad, at the end of the game, the town is going to give you 2 extra victory points. And this deck goes from 2 to 5, and the towns later in the deck are much harder to develop. They take a lot more resources, but they are worth more victory points. The 5th action you can do is to purchase a building. Now there are 6 buildings that begin the game available to players, and these are going to be basic bonuses for each of the commodities. So when you take the produce action, you can choose to use one of your buildings to give you the listed bonus. So when we produce, we could gain 1 luxury. As players buy buildings from this row, better buildings are going to become available, buildings that do various number of things. The freight company is going to allow a player to sell 2 commodities. You can typically only sell 1 commodity on your turn, but the freight company is going to allow you to break that rule. The auction house, every time an auction is held, regardless of who puts a railroad up for auction, the person that owns the auction house gets $5. The black market is going to increase your hand size from 3 to 5, and there are just a whole host of buildings that are going to break typical rules, and some of them are also going to give you end game victory points based on what you've built. So when you purchase buildings and you have them in your tableau, you can use them to store more goods. You can typically only hold 10 goods, but for each building you own, you can store an additional good. Now, those are the 5 actions that players can take on their turn. Again, you can produce, sell, auction, buy, or build. The game flows extremely well. It's very streamlined. Turns go by fast, but the depth of the game really comes in the speculation and the shifting of the economy and how the players at the table interact with that. The game is very easy to understand, but really that depth lies in, again, the economy and purchasing buildings, and in even the auctions, and strategically auctioning off something where, you know, a player may need a specific railroad, but you choose to auction it maybe earlier than they were expecting, and maybe they're unable to purchase it. With the railroads, there is that set collection aspect, and with the towns, you're trying to accumulate the most towns that you can, because at the end of the game, the player who has the most victory points is going to be declared the winner. Now, the way victory points are handled, you're going to take all of your railroads, and depending on the ones that you control, you'll get victory points based on the number that you've collected. If we have any towns, we could pair a town 1 for 1 with a railroad, and so that would give us an additional 2 points, and then each building is going to be worth a victory point at the end of the game. Now, some of the buildings are going to give you victory points based on which ones you own. So if you were to build or buy the governor's mansion, every town that you have helped develop will give you a victory point. So there are a number of buildings that are going to give you end-game victory points outside of the typical points that you could earn. So Raccoon Tycoon is a fun, fast-paced, gateway economic game. The animal tycoons are absolutely phenomenal. The artwork and the graphic design of this game is top-notch. You just look at all of these adorable animals, and it really draws you into this world of Astoria that they've built. So if Raccoon Tycoon sounds like a game for you, if you're interested to know more about this game, take a look at the description below for a link to the Kickstarter campaign. This has been Derek with the Board Game Spotlight, and this has been your preview of Raccoon Tycoon.